Thank you so much to all of you for joining today. And I was thinking one very significant thing about your all of you and the fund that stands out. It's called India Partners, and it is actually about the partners and all of you as partners. What has it meant from 2016 first fund and to this very massive and significant jump that you've made in your second fund?
So thank you, Shraddha. Really appreciate the opportunity. I'll chime in and I'll let my colleagues, kind of add to, what I say. The way we came together, as you already know, India, as an entrepreneurial ecosystem, had done exceptionally well in services sector, IT services, BPO services, pharma services, and then later consumer, internet, and mobile startups did really well. So 2016, when we got together, we did anticipate that there would be a lot of B2B startups, Indian product startups that aspire to go regional and some of them go global. And that's kind of what our focus was. Even prior to pandemic, our focus was on product startups, especially in technology, healthcare, and select consumer at the intersection of financial services or healthcare or education. Um, in terms of why we wanted to focus on early stage, all of us have been entrepreneurs, have operating experience, have run startups or been part of startups, and we knew that apart from writing that first check, an institutional check, the most important thing would be to work with entrepreneurs. That's why we coined the term, the co-founder VC for entrepreneurs. So apart from money, how do we help them in terms of realizing their product, help them get customer traction, get some partners signed up, and importantly, fill the gaps in the team, in the core team, with the critical skills that are necessary. Last but not the least, really put the business plan together to be able to attract growth capital so that they can kind of continue their dream and their journey. While it's very risky at early stage, that's what excites us. And so that's the reason why we wanted to focus on seed stage investments. Very quickly, the journey has been very good thanks to brilliant entrepreneurs. I think we were lucky to work with. I've always on the record said VCs do not create companies, entrepreneurs do. And pretty much we've had, we've been fortunate, I must say, to work with companies like Darwinbox. We were a seed investor. We wrote the seed check for a company called KIST, as you know, early investors in Sigtapal, Steradian Semiconductors, Alpha ICs, Slang Labs, many companies like that, Ekin Care. So, thanks to them again, for every dollar we put in, they've gone and raised $30, $35 from investors like Axels and Sequoias and Lightspeeds and many others, and most recently even Salesforce. So I think now it's kind of really a competitive world out there. There are many more firms that focus on B2B and product startups. Our journey is going to be even more challenging, but I think we're very excited with our new fund. I'll let my colleagues, Dr. Ramesh, Abhishek, Abhiram chime in.
Yeah, Shraddha was saying from 2016 to 2020, a big jump in the size of the fund. It brings to me an old comment made by Vijay Mahajan, the former dean of Indian School of Business, the second dean, almost 18 years back, when I and he worked on a social initiative called Hyderabad 10K Run for the first time in the country. Both of us are chairpersons, and then we're very happy. Dr. Ramesh, no, 2 data points are not enough. You need 1 more data point next year. So this is the second jump, and we need 1 more jump. So when we raise the next round, that's one. The second thing is like startups, when they fundraising is not the all important. I think at the end of the day, we need to showcase and return the money to the investors. So that's the second comment I want to make. But I'm sure we are on the path. But definitely we want you to interview 3 years later when we raise the third fund, and also when we return enough money to the investors in the fund one. That's a comment I want to make.
Yeah, I guess very briefly, if I have to add, Shraddha, I think again the first point to what Dr. Ramesh and you talked about, which is the fund jump. Of course, if you look at the startups, the kind of jumps that they make, from one to the other, VCs still have a lot to catch up. But of course, we are kind of followers. On the second side, I think one of the things that I wanted to talk about from 2016 to 2020, I remember 2015, 2016, core enterprise, SaaS, B2B, early stage, very, very few names,
Yeah.
were there. And I think fast forwarding 4 years, 5 years down the line, this has become the new thing. So obviously, I mean, in a nutshell, kind of similar point that the competition has grown up. But at the same time, I think the appetite, overall market pie has also increased, right? So hopefully, all things moving in the right direction.
There is this whole worldwide phenomena where B2B is interesting, it's exciting, it's sexy, and it's the new place for all the funds to go. But I know that when I interacted with you earlier, you believed in this space much, much early. Want to understand how has your journey, one, from an India context been? And the second thing is that your belief in this space, which has been from early on, how does it evolve?
If you really look at for an ecosystem to blossom, I believe there are 5 components which are very, very important. 1 is talent, 2 is capital, 3 is markets, 4th policy, and 5th is exits. So if you really look at, I think we've had plenty of talent even in B2B. Returning Indians who have worked for R&Ds of Indian conglomerates as well as MNCs, as well as some of the fresh graduates who are fearless and very, very talented. So the talent pool has been very, very fertile. Markets were slowly evolving, local markets for B2B. But post-pandemic, digital transformation, acceleration, better than I do. I think certainly laggards can leapfrog, right? All of a sudden. Hence, you see markets growing faster. And then the fact that you could also go regional and sometimes even global, selectively Indian product, startups building for global markets. So markets are there. Now, we kind of took the mantle of providing capital early on. So now there's plenty of capital, as you know. Policy has been fantastic in terms of fairly friendly, entrepreneur friendly. Of course, a few more things could be done, to jumpstart or to take the ecosystem to the next level. Exits, I believe now are going to happen. It's not just earlier, we were betting on secondaries. Private equity funds come and buy the early stage investors. But now I believe that lots of corporates from outside of India, who have a lot of money on their balance sheets, are going to use that money, to purchase companies everywhere in the world. But not only just investors from outside. I think in India itself, you're seeing Indian conglomerates buying startups, Indian startups for billions of dollars. And also Indian unicorns and decacorns making acquisitions, right? In the last years, we know that some of the big acquisitions in India are made by Indian unicorns. So clearly now the acquisition landscape has become fairly wide. So I think that's what is going to provide the very necessary momentum and connectivity to capital, not just local capital, but global capital as well. Earlier, it was happening a lot in consumer internet and mobile internet media, but now you see it happening in fintech. You see it happening a lot in B2B, right? Like Salesforce's investment, they talked about the first investment in Asia in Darwinbox. So you'll see connectivity to the global capital pool. I still believe the challenges would be entrepreneurs while planning their journey. How do they build something for regional markets and global markets? Do they understand the customers? Do they understand the competition? Can they really hire their talent? Why would a great VP of sales or VP of marketing come work for you, not a Silicon Valley company or an Israeli company? that's a question they need to answer when they go seek that kind of talent. It's not just capital you raise and the valuation you have. Your product matters, your culture matters. So I think as long as they create their own playbooks, follow some of the existing playbooks, and create their own playbooks, I believe there's going to be humongous number of quality startups from India that are going to foray into regional and global markets. And like I said, clearly what we have done in last decade on the B2B front, I believe will accomplish the same in the next 5 years, certainly.
Product startups have a global play. So today, if you are building out of India, then you're competing with someone building even in Estonia or anywhere in the world. So it has to be world class. And I would love to hear later in the interview if you can talk about how do you instill some of these things, or bring these kind of thinking or working in the companies with whom you work.
Certainly, I think a couple of examples there. Abhishek can talk about Steradian Semiconductors. It's a fabulous company in our portfolio, Shraddha, in terms of designing imaging radar chips. These chips are used in place of LiDAR. So it's in autonomous vehicles or drones or, many of the object tracking applications, what we have done there. Dr. Ramesh can definitely talk about Triple, the AI, hematology, which is aspiring, a global play. What specific things, we have done? Maybe, I don't know if you think this is the right time, I could have them chime in, on these aspects, or if you think at a later point, that's fine.
Do you feel now the time has come? Do you feel in the last 24 months, last 3 years, maybe the time has come, or maybe now last 12 to 18 months, or maybe with the pandemic, the time has come because you've seen the market? What do you have to say about that?
Shraddha, I think in healthcare specifically, on the medical devices, we haven't built a global company yet. Large equipment is still the GE, Siemens, Philips, Toshiba, Shimadzu, and Philips. Whereas on the generics, definitely we made a big mark in the world all these years, the last 20 years. Obviously, on healthcare delivery, hospitals are always local. That's okay. But definitely the last 12 months, if you see, fortunately, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we're able to bring a vaccine, a completely homegrown vaccine. And when compared to Pfizer's and AstraZeneca's, probably we're just a month behind. Probably we're same as AstraZeneca, Pfizer and Moderna, we're just probably 2 months behind. That means from the day a new disease has come out, identifying the organism, developing a vaccine. So it's not just the scientists, the pharma companies, the biotech companies, the government, the regulatory authorities, everyone works so together. So we're able to get a vaccine in 12 months, which in the normal circumstances would have taken 10, 20 years. The rotavirus took 20 years to develop. On the same subject, we're able to bring the PCR test to India within probably 2 months after the discovery of the organism. If the organism has been identified in January, if Taiwan and China brought the PCR test in February, Indian companies are able to bring in probably April, May timeframe. That means we can no more say we don't have the talent. We can't say the Indian regulatory authorities are too slow. I think definitely both the indigenous PCR test as well as the vaccine showcase the capability of the Indian scientists, the startups, as well as the regulatory authorities, government to work together. And those two examples are giving. And there's no reason why tomorrow a new molecule cannot come out of India, or for that matter, a global device company can come out of it. I think we just showcase that. I strongly believe, at least in healthcare, a lot more global companies will come out of India.
Yeah, and it was also good to see in the budget that so much of healthcare, there was a significant allocation for healthcare this time.
That is true, almost like 130% or 140%. The most of it, the predominant scheme, I strongly believe it was announced in the last budget also, the so-called health and wellness centers, 100,000 health and wellness centers using technology. Tertiary care is okay. Patients come to the hospital, you treat, but how do you prevent disease? And I think that's where the tech companies, so-called healthcare digital companies are struggling throughout the world, not just India. I think if the health and wellness, really government implements those 100,000 health and wellness centers, and also the national digital blueprint, or which they are talking for a couple of years, like the fintech stack, the health stack, those two components can be the game changer for India, not only preventing disease, identifying pandemics quite early. And
Yeah.
I'm a strong believer. And the only thing is, I'm getting restless. It took almost a year for them, but hopefully those two initiatives will take off the next 12 months.
Sorry, to answer your question, from a very different perspective, I think definitely pandemic has accelerated our journey. The reason being, nations are all building their business continuity plans. We have earlier seen business continuity plans for corporates. Nations probably didn't have. I think they were relying too much on global supply chains.
Yeah.
It was a world where the best should win, and let's go to a place where you can source products, the cheapest.
Yeah.
So many a times, even for small components, you're dependent on China, Taiwan, or elsewhere, and didn't have the local sourcing capabilities. So given now pandemic mandates that a certain portion of your supply chain has to be local, which you have control on, certainly, this is going to be accelerated. The other reason is today, because of the pandemic and the digital transformation, many folks have no choice but to fast track their journey, their digital journey. Given that, I think it acts as a catalyst for many of our companies, to go to the next level. I mean, today, actually, if you really look at the semiconductor, look at the geopolitical pressures. We all know about the geopolitical situation.
Yeah.
If Taiwan were to say that I'm not going to manufacture enough semiconductors, US would be in a spin, and so would be many other countries, because the entire world depends on Taiwan for semiconductors. TSMC alone powers up majority of the electronics that the world consumes, right? So clearly now, you need to be self-reliant. If you have to be self-reliant, you have to invest. And to be able to invest, you've got to go to the right talent. And I believe that we'll see many good examples in various sectors.
What are some of the learnings, insights, or some of the things that you help entrepreneurs who are building these kind of businesses? Because of course, consumer internet gets a lot of attention, and then you come in early in the companies that you come in. What are some of the things that you do so that they can play in the global arena?
I think that also kind of brings back to the previous point as well, Shraddha, which you asked, and Satish also highlighted from a Steradian point of view. So let me put it upfront, a disclaimer that I don't think a lot of these deep tech companies have yet found a playbook. I know, SaaS and enterprise have come of age. There have been few successes, if I may call so. But I think a lot of these are still kind of trying to identify, set the path, are the pioneers in their own way. Just to bring a case in point, if you look at something like Steradian, which is designing and kind of building a high resolution imaging radar chip as well as systems, which sits again in any of the autonomous technology. I think the first impression that comes to the mind that the market is all global. How the guys in India, how do they even bridge this market gap? Right? Then on top of it, again, if you're investing something from an Indian product standpoint, where a lot of competitors, or at least the landscape and the market is India, it's relatively easier for you to stitch out a competition and the overall industry landscape, right? The positioning, etc. The moment you step out, I think, unless and until you go and do the actual sale in US or Europe, you actually don't realize, what you read is what you know, unless and until you're on the ground, right? So a lot of these things come and start taking some kind of shape. I think from our perspective, if I start right from word go, when we made the seed investment in Steradian, I think these guys were raising the seed round, and they had a couple of interesting offers even from India as a co-investor. We took a conscious choice, of getting someone like Visteon, out there in US, having a very strong hold in the auto sector and the ADAS market, from a market share and command perspective, a lot of domain expertise perspective to get as the co-investor. And I think 2-3 reasons. One is, from a product tech validation, we knew that it's not just about that momentary phase. I think it's a journey, where the tech needs to kind of come out very strongly vis-a-vis the competitors out over there. The second is also with respect to the fact, like I said, building that market, access to the global markets, right? So that was one. Second, of course, in terms of how to even establish a little bit of your own sales and marketing, from that geography perspective. So be it the elements of engaging, with a lot of analysts, doing a deep dive in terms of what's really happening on the other side, and who are the key players, what are the product specs vis-a-vis, their positioning, the potential, I would say, GTM. That becomes very critical, and I think that's been one of the fundamental, at least from a Steradian point of view, where we've tried to build certain bridges, as well as kind of fill in the gaps, as well as trying to help them bring someone from a sales perspective. And again, third is more with respect to, while we'll always continue to help them, like most of the VCs, in terms of any follow-on rounds. I think eventually it just boils down to how do you bridge these gaps around customer, product, team perspective, right, to take them to the next level. So I think bringing that element of connecting them with the right set of domain experts, again from US, who come from that industry, helping them strengthening a lot of these tech specs as well as product, and making it relevant from a use case standpoint out over there from a customer perspective in US, again, has been also instrumental. So these have been, some of the areas, and again, I mean, these kind of by themselves also get established, and again, kudos to them, as a team, a very, very strong team, and they have been extremely capital efficient. One of the things which I think is hard to find and here these days, but very, very capital efficient in terms of building, taking the IP to the kind of taping it out and getting, the prototype out, the POCs, and then eventually getting some customer wins. So that's been their journey. Basically, we feel very, very positive about it. I mean, a true blue story. Hopefully, time will tell where right from simple IP, how these guys have built something from India for a true global market.
The 5 metrics that we look at, one is, when we engage and then as they evolve, right, through the life cycle, product, customers, revenues, funding, team. These 5 metrics, we really look at how we added value. These aren't just introductions to, a headhunter or, someone who's going to give them an opportunity at a conference. Like I said earlier, I mean, we don't run the car from the backseat. Entrepreneur gets all the credit, for running. But we do make sure that, we invest in what we understand and where we can add value. So that way, our philosophy and investment strategy has been, we look at 16, 18 investments over 3 years, which is like 5 to 6 investments a year, and in domains that we understand. So for that reason, we understand the demand side pretty well, not just the supply side. I should be able to connect the dots. If there's a particular product, who is the end customer, who are their competitors, where would the upstream capital kind of come from, and what would an analyst's perspective be, and so that we can help the entrepreneurs.
Today now you're competing in a space which is, you were doing this, but now everyone is doing this, right? Like everyone is, B2B is attractive. Healthcare is now going to be even more attractive, and, deep learning space. Now you're competing with everyone, the big, large global funds to every possible person who is investing. So how are you going to make sure that you continue to stand out?
Yeah, no, I think that's a question that we ask ourselves every day, and there's a bit of a spiritual outlook to this. So to really look at, what do you, kind of when you wake up, what are you inspired by, right? We didn't choose to become a seed stage fund because there was just an opportunity there. And then say, oh, now that we've performed well, now raise a bigger fund and a bigger fund and a bigger fund and play assets under management game. We chose to play early stage while we knew the risk because we loved that. We love rolling up our sleeves and going to work with our entrepreneurs. And if you really look at, there's no hierarchy within our firm, right? I think while we're all, senior team members, Dr. Ramesh has the same enthusiasm for an early stage deal, like a 30-year-old or a 25-year-old. Otherwise, it's not like, an analyst would.
Dr. Ramesh, he's established year old. Continue.
No, I'm just saying, no, I think he's the youngest of our team. Spirit and energy, honestly. We're so inspired by him. So what I mean to say is that it's not like, someone will look at it and then they'll say, okay, this is a good deal. It goes to the next level and then it goes to the next level. We are the receptionists, we are in the pantry, we are on the board and we are the investors and we love doing it, right?
Yeah.
So we wake up every morning saying that which is that, company that inspires us. So to me, no doubt, I think there are fantastic investors who have global networks, humongous amount of money, who can write $1 million, who can write $100 million, under the same umbrella, kind of check sizes. And they're all intelligent or more intelligent than us and work equally or harder than us. But our strategy, is not all things to all people. We invest in what we like, what we understand, where we can add value. And we're talking about 18 deals to 20 deals, 5-6 deals a year. We believe that we'll get them and we'll continue to attract those. I think there are two kinds of approaches. There are people who want to get to invitation to the best party out there that's happening in the town. And then there are people who create parties that others want to attend. And I think we believe in creating parties that people want to attend. Right? I don't sound arrogant when I say that, but that's just because of our focus.
Yeah, just to give you a deeper context on why we do that, Satish did mention all of us are ex-entrepreneurs, ex-operating guys. So just to give an example, there are people within the team who have started startups, people who have raised funding as part of startups, people who have run hospitals, people who have managed startups, rolled out initiatives within startups, hired people, fired people, pivoted business lines, gone out there into the market and actually tried and found out customers, did find customers, came back, changed the plans. And also people who have raised money for their own companies and helped others raise companies. So if you look at it, there is a whole spectrum of activities which get involved. We were involved in our past lives. And the early stage at which we invest, the teams are actually pretty small in size, right? They have limited time available with them, and they may not have all the skill sets available with them at that point. In fact, we have invested in some companies where the legal entity was incorporated a day before we signed the term sheet. So in those situations, when we get in, it also becomes essential that we provide all the understanding and the expertise that we have garnered over the years to actually help them move faster, help them scale up faster, and think through in a wider perspective, be able to challenge them, help them get the bigger perspective and also understand the potential risks and what are the options available to them. So that way it becomes a very partnership kind of a model where we have a team who are the founders who are building something, and we are not just giving them the money at the initial stage and the subsequent rounds when we participate, but also trying to guide them, nurture them, counsel them, or sometimes just hear them out when they're really down and out, and we are just trying to build up their morale. So it's a exciting thing that we do as part of this early stage journey.
We have different types of people in the world. Some people want to work on known things and amplify things. I think we get inspired by unknown unknowns. I think we get challenges and then work with those. I think that really inspires us to come to work every day. Otherwise, I could be sitting in my cath lab doing 10-15 angiograms, angioplasties, doing the same thing. But I think what we like, I think I'm sure Satish, Abhishek, Abhiram would say, we like the so-called unknown unknowns or the challenges, how to solve them, out of the box thinking, because all of us come from different domains, and we enjoy that experience actually.
There is a spiritual element, because what I see is that you're enjoying the process. You're enjoying the process of this unknown, creating your own party where you're helping genuinely the entrepreneurs. So there's nothing like there to prove that, hey, we have to be the #1 investor in the world or some kind of a benchmarking, but just create some best companies out of India.
Yeah, so no doubt, right, Shraddha? I mean, we all know, whether you go to Cambridge Associates or now in India, CRISIL is, CRISIL is looking at performing, benchmarking all the funds. We are in the top quartile, of course, we'll be even in top decile eventually, hopefully so. I think those benchmarks we have to meet, and we have to produce returns to our LPs who trust us and give us the money. But I think more important is our responsibility to our entrepreneurs, right? And for them, they're all in. This is like, they're 100% into it. Whereas VCs play a portfolio game. 3 out of your 10 portfolio companies perform well. Everybody talks about power law, winner pays for all the losers. But what happens to the other 8 entrepreneurs, right? Who put in, their 100% and for 7, 8, 9 years of their prime life. So I think one can agree to disagree, and there could be, disagreement, but it doesn't mean that, you are sitting on the other side of the table. You're on the same side of the table. As long as you realize that, hey, you can have that candid conversation, and even if it's a tough conversation, it could be a conversation that's meaningful.
Your fund, the first fund, has actually, 75% of the companies have gone on to raise next rounds, right?
Actually, now 95%, 90 or 95%. And
wow.
$30 we put in, like I said earlier, $30 to $35 they've raised from other investors.
Hitting out of the park.
Yeah, almost most of them raised, follow-on rounds. Many of them have raised Series Cs, Series Bs, and like I said, we've invested in most of those rounds, not just the seed check, but multiple checks.
Okay, now I just want to ask 2021, 22, 23, now with this fund, you have 3 years, and we are in a different world right now for whatever, this pandemic has created in our lives. Is there anything changing in your investment thesis? Is there going to be something different now with this fund?
I'll start and then let, Dr. Ramesh and others chime in. Like I said earlier, even prior to pandemic, we were very heavily focused on tech, healthcare, and select consumers. So from that perspective, we haven't changed anything. Post-pandemic, digital transformation, healthcare, both have tailwinds, as you know. I think the key is we are looking at 2 themes today, which is Indian companies building for regional markets, and then India building for global. Earlier, we used to see kind of one bucket, which is India going either regional as well as global. But now I think India going regional is very, very clear opportunity, a large opportunity. If you really look at Southeast Asia, gives you a decent opportunity. And then India going to global is going to be significantly lower than what we had earlier thought. While you see some examples of SaaS companies, Chargebees or Zenotis or Freshworks and others, but India going after US or Europe markets is not an easy thing. Right? So certainly that's a learning. But we also believe that there would be some of the global plays targeting emerging markets. Certainly previously, when companies out of Valley or Europe targeted emerging markets, they would lose interest from the investors, from those geographies, because they would want to invest in companies that were going after the local markets as far as US and Europe were concerned. But now they going global, definitely those investors are very open. So we do see opportunities, certainly, in that area, more and more opportunities in that area. The other thing is, I think in terms of the new normal, the sizes of the rounds are increasing. What used to be Series B is now Series A. What used to be Series C is now Series B, right? So in that context, we wanted to be ready, not only allocating capital for multiple rounds from our own pool of capital, but have the LPs, be able to write checks as co-investors as these kind of companies grow. So we do see that also happening, quite a bit, in this leg of the journey. The other piece is, I think, in the last fund, we were more monitoring, didn't make too many investments, was the life sciences sector, that Dr. Ramesh is now pursuing, very actively. These are, the key changes, that I see, Abhishek, Dr. Ramesh, Abhiram.
Just to add one more point, apart from writing bigger checks, we will be also able to write checks for longer period for maybe one more round. So coming back to your point about the bigger fund, so it helps us write bigger checks, write checks for a longer time for the same portfolio companies, and also get into sectors like life sciences, which we have been monitoring, and this gives us that freedom to venture into those areas as well.
Dr. Ramesh, I would love if you could talk about life sciences. What are some of the things that you're going to be looking at in this field?
Shraddha, definitely. Before I go there, many people ask us whether your thesis has changed, investment thesis has changed from Fund 1 and Fund 2. The reason they ask us is the Fund 2 we just closed after the pandemic, and they would like to know whether the pandemic has changed. As Satish mentioned, in fact, what we wrote in 2015 for Fund 1 still remains the same for Fund 2 also, whether in the technology side or in the healthcare side. So in the healthcare side, I was mentioning before, in pharma, generics were strong all these years, last 20, 30 years. And similarly, in healthcare delivery side, we are reasonably strong all these years. But in between, we haven't made a big mark actually. Probably on the vaccine side, probably definitely yes. To an extent, we have the Serum Institute of India, we have the Bharat Biotech, we have Shanta Biotech, which has been acquired by US companies. So we have two companies. But definitely, I think there are a lot of other areas are there. In when I say life sciences is such a vast subject. It includes digital health. When I say life sciences, I'm taking away the medical devices part, the diagnostics part, the pharma, and then the core life sciences. Can we make a mark? Is one always. People always feel we are very strong in chemistry. People feel we are very weak in biology. I think that is changing, I think. And I think to a large extent, if you have noticed, there's a governmental body called Department of Biotechnology. Under that, there is an autonomous institution called BIRAC, which is supporting startups the last 5-6 years with multiple schemes, both from the grant side and the equity side. And of late, they started a fund of fund also. I think they have created enough momentum now. And now I think it's the time for it to go to the next level. And I think post-COVID and the examples I gave you, the vaccine we're able to develop in 12 months. And all these initiatives are coming together. And I strongly feel there's a possibility that good deep sciences companies will make a big mark now. When I say those areas can be stem cells, can be genomics, can be CAR therapy, can be biosimilars, a whole lot of those companies can come up.
But that's a very significant, maybe I am reading it differently now when you say life sciences, because it is the need. It is, and it is very encouraging to see that your fund will be investing in this space.
And this mRNA technology, I forgot the lady's name, the person who started working on it for the last 20, 30 years. At one stage, she was even demoted by her university and she joined Moderna. And that was actually, she was working in the last 20 years actually. And this mRNA technology can help in multiple other areas actually, not just the vaccine development, can work in cancers and untreatable disorders. You can change the genetic code and make your body fight the cancers also. I think probably the 100 times magnitude benefit can come out of the mRNA technology itself actually.
Do you see any different kind of models emerging that would be exciting, interesting, which has been induced because of this pandemic?
In terms of, at least our recent bets, whether it's Luri, which is more SaaS opportunity kind of going global. I think what they are looking at is, building in a bit of distributor workforce remote work kind of models, into their business plans. And then the other piece is, I think, what's happening now is the way, earlier we've tapped talent uh, from other markets or other cities. Now I think you would see more and more of these companies tapping, into the talent pools, even from other countries, post-pandemic. I think they're more open. Last night, Abhishek and I were interviewing, someone for sales and business development for one of our portfolio companies, sitting out of Valley, right? And so earlier, we haven't seen that, that kind of an openness as much. I mean, we've seen, okay, having an engineering center, Bombay startups having an engineering center in Bangalore, or Delhi startups having an engineering center in Hyderabad or Chennai, but you're seeing these sans borders. And I think the most important thing is there's a level playing field. I don't see so much on technology, but I'm seeing a lot more of it in the healthcare world. If you really look at earlier, the path was very known. I think the talent pool comes together, they get the capital, they build the product, patent it, and then go through certification, CE or FDA, and then go to market. And then you either license it or you build your own distribution and then grow the business. People knew what to do, but they were not embarking on that journey. But now I see many more entrepreneurs, especially from the healthcare world, going out there and kind of doing it. So to me, I think the significant change in the mindset, the tech, rationalize and do more of less. That's what entrepreneurs are focusing on. Build in certain amount of remote work, tap into talent wherever that exists. So that's kind of the tech mantra. I think in the healthcare world, I'm seeing people kind of making those bold moves, not shying away, saying that if I know what needs to be done, I'd be able to pull in the other elements that are necessary for my success, and let me start on this journey, is what I'm seeing.
While some of these technologies are available, but pandemic brought them to the fore actually. For example, telepathology, for example, teleradiology, for example, or even, for example, a remote village is there, a tribal village. All these days, if a major problem is there, a patient has to be brought to a larger city or a bigger city for an ultrasound. Just imagine a situation, a pregnant lady is there in a remote village and there's no way she can be transferred. Just put an ultrasound probe on the abdomen, and with a person not even qualified as a technician, the images can be beamed to a central place. Not just even the AI itself can tell whether it's a normal pregnancy or a breech pregnancy. And those technologies are available now at affordable price. And I think this pandemic has definitely changed the way we as doctors used to think of treating patients. And I think that's a good sign for the humanity in general.
So if I just add a few more points to what at least Satish was trying to highlight more on the tech side, and I understand, I mean, if I understood even the question correctly, I think, so one is, of course, more on the emerging new businesses out of pandemic, and the other is the whole engagement model, right? Whether it's within the startups or, VC with startups, et cetera, et cetera. I think new businesses, most importantly, all of these things, be it the digital transformation or physical, digital, right, what we call phygital, I think all these things were in action. By and large, most of these things have got accelerated. I think that's been, of course, one fundamental push. So there definitely, anything which kind of supports overall, remote workforce management, be it from a productivity, collaboration, I think it's only going to get more and more push. I think the other side is maybe a little bit early to call it off, but definitely looks like people don't want to shy away from getting talent, even if at the cost of somewhere else, right? So remote first organizations getting built. I mean, startups getting built may not be so much for the leaderships, but definitely, let's say you have good engineering talent, you have good marketing talent, something which is anyways being done in a very inbound manner, in a very controlled and constrained manner, people are not shying off. And I have started seeing some of the decks which kind of very, I would say they feel like privileged, and they flash it out. They make it a point to flash it out. They're remote first startups. So of course, like I said, still very early days. So there will be a little bit of change, I think, in the engagement model as well. And lastly, between, of course, VC and startups, of course, if we expect and continue to ask startups to evolve to any of these unseen and kind of unknown events as VCs, of course, we also need to kind of follow the path. So I know the deals got done, a lot of deals got done. It's still very early days for a lot of VCs to not meet, in person with the companies and pull the trigger. But I think, gradually that's also being cut down. I mean, the cycles of meeting in person, a lot of it is now being shared, over remote and video calls, and probably, still just having 1 or 2 meetings is sufficient enough. So we'll see how these things evolve, but definitely, few silver linings out of whole 2020. Some of these things in the healthcare and digital transformation, of course, seems to be heading in the positive way.
What has this year meant for you? And Satish, I'm very curious about you, because every week you were in Bangalore. Like every week or something you were here. You were like traveling so much, you were always somewhere. What has it meant? And what has it done to you as leaders, as professionals?
What started out as surreal in the month of March or late Feb of last year, I think as the year passed through, there was awareness, acknowledgement. I must say, I was very, very lucky. While it's very unfortunate in the world, we've lost many precious lives and many, loved ones and a lot of hardships. But as a human being, I think, when I reflect, I don't think I would have ever gotten 9 to 12 months spending time with my family. I've walked with my daughter every day. I've done yoga nidra with my son. I've done meditation, with my older one. I've had great conversations, number one. 2, early days, till May when we were in lockdown, I've swept, I've mopped, I've cooked, I've cleaned. So it was wonderful, just discovering, what you can do and not being dependent. I think most importantly to me, it's also about, I think, while we celebrate a lot of success, the importance of the most powerful was also, very much under the lens. I think the pandemic kind of exposed. And if you really look at, most of the states started kind of tending towards state socialism than state capitalism, because lots of years, I think we've all talked about free economy and borderless, economies, and on one global platform. But every citizen everywhere in the world wanted food, shelter, and health, irrespective of whether they work or not. And governments had to tend to them. There was no choice. So I think when I really look at, all of these, that kind of happened, I just feel very fortunate that I was able to witness a moment like that. Right? So you have to completely surrender and then soak it in, to kind of come out very strong. So I'm very much looking forward. In fact, even our guidance to our startups was the same. I think we looked at it as 3 phases. Phase 1 was COVID discovery and the world in panic. What we wanted to do was, first thing, we wanted to make sure our founders were safe. They all had health insurance. Their loved ones were safe. That was the first thing. And second thing was a bit of business continuity planning and, making sure that all the data is protected. And then the third thing was they ensure that they had enough runway, all of that. But the phase 2 was going to be, irrespective of COVID, curve is going to grow or flatten, business or the world was resuming its operations, coming back to normalcy. And phase 3 is like you've got a repurposed medicine or a vaccine in sight, and the world, kind of, coming back to normalcy. And as usual, which is probably the phase we are about to enter. So I think this journey has been very wonderful. And to me, I realized that all of many a times we care really about our body health, our financial health, and maybe a little bit we reflect on the purpose of life. But I think pandemic pushed us to really care about our mental health and care about our relationships health. And many a times that was the biggest challenge for people. How do you have that mental resilience? Not able to do what you were doing normally. So all in all, nature's grace. I think we're still here. We're still doing fine, and we've at least seen this through. But it's been a wonderful experience.
Pandemic taught us how to do things productively. For example, I remember in 2016, you and your team came all the way from Bangalore, spending so much time, and so we achieved the same thing in last 1 hour without going out of our way.
I disagree with that, Dr. Ramesh. I would rather sit with Shraddha and have that conversation in person. And I don't believe that, yes, Zoom calls are very important and yes, they are very productive, but still certain number of in-person meetings you cannot, do away with.
Yeah, no, I think very quickly, I mean, at least from my perspective, just on the similar point, Shraddha, 3 things and very disconnected things. So one is I had never seen or noticed, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, birds still around. I think life without humans, at least on the road, seemed very peaceful, nice and clean. Second is, being personally on the darker side of the COVID and probably, can say been there, done that kind of thing.
You had COVID?
Yes, I did.
Oh,
I could realize the power of, the best practices, because it's like a black box, right? You don't know what's going to happen the next day, but it's just worked on the principles of best practices. So if you can just extrapolate that in some of the businesses where you don't know anything, probably things may work on the positive side. And finally, I think entrepreneurs' mettle, right? Overall, in general, it's just been phenomenal, because it's very difficult to, it's still difficult to see things happening from a distance. I can imagine how it would be, kind of sitting in the thick of things and then trying to manage, right? So it's just been phenomenal to see how things have been turned around by most of the guys.
Just to add to that, I think this situation has actually been a very big culture test. This is how I was mentioning to one of the companies, saying, okay, we talk about all principles, values, mission, vision, all those things, right? But it is at these times when people are actually put to that test. So now it is for the team to decide, are you willing to take pay cut for whatever percentage so that someone else can get salary this month? Or are you going to fire someone and do something else? Are you going to let go of this customer because you can't service them? Are you? So I don't think even BCPs would have factored anything of this nature. So the innate principles and culture of the organization was put to a test in this situation, and we've hopefully seen people coming out on the right side of it.
Thanks so much. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.